Mr. President.
The senator from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the time. I think we've had a very interesting debate on Betsy DeVos and, frankly, on public education. Listening to my friends on the left, I've been encouraged because I'm excited that for the first time in a very long time, we're actually having a conversation about the important role of public education in America. This is a necessary component to success in life. I've been inspired by senators who have spoken eloquently and passionately about the importance of our public education system, the challenges that they fear might come with the appointment of Betsy DeVos to be Secretary of Education. I've also been disappointed and frustrated by some of the statements made by my friends on the other side. What this should not be, is a partisan issue. This is not an issue of Republicans versus Democrats. That is not what this is about. This is not even a political issue, nor is this an issue about teachers. I, for one, am so very thankful for incredible teachers. I think of Mrs. Lynch, Mrs. Greenberg, my fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Wynn, God bless her soul. I was a handful. I think of Coach Roberts and Mr. White. We called him Mighty White, Mr. White. What amazing English teacher I had in my senior year. Or Miss Berry and Miss Myers, wonderful Spanish teachers. This is not about teachers. It's not necessarily about Betsy DeVos, not even Betsy DeVos. For me, the issue is simply an issue of quality education, and I will, without any question, have a very specific conversation on Betsy DeVos. For me, however, this is simply about quality education and how we get there. My story is familiar to many people in this chamber. I've spoken about it on a number of times, and I will tell you that my entire time in the Senate, the 4 years I've been here, I've been talking consistently about the power of education and the necessity of quality education. I call it the opportunity agenda. The opportunity agenda, which has been my focus for the last 4 years, focuses first on education, making sure that every single zip code in America has a quality choice for education. This is so important to me. As a poor kid growing up in a single-parent household, I was not doing very well. And from 7 to 14, I drifted in the wrong direction. As a freshman in high school, I basically flunked out. I failed world geography. I may be the first senator to fail civics. I even failed Spanish and English. When you fail Spanish and English, no one, Mr. President, considers you bilingual. No one. They did call me, by the way, bi-ignorant, because I cannot speak in any language. And that's where I found my unhappy self. I had two major blessings in my life, Mr. President. A wonderful mother who believed in my future, who encouraged me, who inspired me, who did everything necessary to try to keep me on the right track. And I had a powerful mentor. I am so thankful that during the hardest times of my life, I found myself in the position to receive a quality education. And I learned from my sophomore year forward to take advantage of that positive, strong opportunity for quality education. But it was not always the case. I remember by the time I was in the fourth grade, I had gone to 4 different elementary schools because there's something transient about poverty. And so we moved around some. Picking the right school was difficult, challenging. So for me, Mr. Chairman, when I think about this topic, when I hear my friends on the left, when I think about the debate around the nation, this is simply a clear debate and discussion around education. It changed my life for the better. I'll tell you, Mr. Chairman, that this is, as I said, not a Republican or Democrat issue. Both Republicans and Democrats around this nation, maybe not in this chamber, but around this nation, supports Betsy DeVos to be the next Secretary of Education. And that's good news. Well, let me just talk for a few minutes about Betsy DeVos. I've listened to the concerns, as we've heard from the senator from Pennsylvania. Tens of thousands of folks have called the offices of all senators, to include mine. I've been on the phone, answering the phone in my office, so I would have a chance to chat with my constituents who called in from in the state, and we've certainly had a ton of calls from outside the state. And here are some of the concerns that I heard from my constituents that I know were serious concerns and important parts of a conversation. One serious concern was the lack of experience that she has. And I will tell you, Mr. President, that she brings with her a fresh set of eyes. That, yes, she has no official experience, but she has invested the last 28 years of her life in improving public education. She has supported, without any question, the creation of public charter schools. I had the privilege of speaking at a charter school in Michigan, started by Betsy DeVos and her husband 3 or 4 years ago, an aviation high school that focuses on making sure that the students are prepared to be competent and to qualify for good jobs in the aviation transportation sector. Phenomenal school. I enjoyed my interaction with the kids. So I will tell you that not only has she spent 28 years, the last 28 years of public education, not only has she spent millions of her own money focusing on education, she has a set of fresh eyes, and I'll explain to you in a few minutes why that is so important if we are going to improve the quality of education experience in the rural areas like West Virginia or in South Carolina, as well as the inner cities from Chicago to Detroit and parts of South Carolina as well. So that will be an important part of the conversation as we move forward, Mr. President. Second thing I've heard from my constituents that I think it's really important is that she doesn't support accountability equally for charter schools and other public schools. I had the chance to talk with Betsy DeVos, and I would not support her if she was not going to treat all schools the same as it relates to accountability. That is important, and that is a place where she has been crystal clear from my perspective. A third issue that I've heard is that supporting Betsy DeVos will somehow ruin public education. I'll tell you, I've had the chance to sit down and chat with her about the role of public education. She agrees with many on our side of the aisle, Mr. President, when she said very clearly, she supports public education. She supports quality public education. She supports charter schools. She supports school choice. I do not believe that there is a binary choice between public education and school choice. I think that is not an accurate description that we face. I think she will help to improve public education. One of my friends on the left said that public education is a right. But for too many of our children, quality public education is not. It is simply not happening. Now, I'll tell you, as I think about the numbers around this concept, I look at those schools around the nation that meets or exceeds our national standard in the area of English or language arts. In my home state, in the county where I was born, Charleston County, if you break it down, and this is a debate that has become a debate so often about where you live and what you look like. And so I wanted to break it down by the demographics that I've heard so often from my friends on the left, because these are important demographics. And it's very important for us to understand and appreciate the necessity of improving quality education for all of our students. And I see in Charleston County, in meeting or exceeding the English standards that we have set, that 78% of our white kids are doing just fine in meeting and or exceeding those national standards. But unfortunately, Mr. President, that only 24.4% of our black students meet or exceed those standards. Our Hispanic students in Charleston County, only 27.7% meet or exceed those standards, Mr. President. I will tell you that if you think about where we are as a nation on the issue of public education, and you drive into some of the inner cities like in Chicago or Detroit or Philadelphia, you have to ask yourself, what is the experience of that child in public education? Because see, I think that this is the central debate for our country. It's around education because a poor education has a strong correlation with our incarceration rates. A poor education has a strong correlation with high unemployment rates. A poor education has a correlation with low income, lifetime income. So the importance of the issue of quality education, particularly in those places in our country that seems to be under tremendous stress. We should drill into the numbers so that we can appreciate what the future looks like for those kids. This is such an important issue. In Chicago, 65% of our majority students meet or exceed the standard in English or language arts. But only 22% of our African American kids meet or exceed the standards. 29% of our Hispanic kids in Chicago meets or exceeds the standards. So what are the numbers in Detroit? Well, Detroit, only 13% of our majority students meet or exceed those English standards. 9%, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9% of African American kids meet or exceed the standard. 12.5% of our Hispanic kids meet or exceed those standards. Just correlate those numbers to the incarceration rates, to the employment rates, to the lifetime income rates, and to the rate of hopelessness in those communities. I know, Mr. President, we are having a debate about the Secretary of Education. It's an important debate, but a more important debate centers around the educational experience of our students all over this nation and what that means long term for this nation and for those students and for our communities all over the country. Philadelphia, Mr. Chairman, it's another place where 53%, barely half of the majority students meet or exceed the standards. 24% of African American students and 23% of Hispanic students meet or exceed the standards. What does that mean? That means that while we're having a debate about education, while we're having a debate about Betsy DeVos, maybe it's not about Betsy DeVos. Maybe it's not about the great teachers that I have had and others have had. We should all celebrate quality public education. I do. Great, I'm a tremendous supporter of it. But there is a place in this nation, from the Appalachia, rural areas in West Virginia, rural areas in South Carolina, inner cities that I've just named, where the quality education is not the norm. As a matter of fact, the exact opposite is the norm. And that means that we all will pay a hefty price, not financially, because that's secondary. We lose human potential when it is not developed, and that is a travesty, one that we can ill afford as a nation. So while I am seriously concerned about our debate on Betsy DeVos, and I'm seriously concerned about public education, I am very concerned about the quality outcomes not being experienced by our rural kids and our inner city kids, and far too often we forget to have a debate about the children in the system. We have a debate about the system. We have a debate about the secretary of the system, but we haven't thoroughly vetted the accomplishments or the lack of accomplishments within that system. So we ought not cast a shadow over all public education. We should, however, illuminate or cast a bright light into the problem areas and look for options to improve the outcome for those kids not only trapped in a failing system, but for the rest of their lives playing catch up. That's where our focus should be. We've heard a whole lot of hyperbole about what the next Secretary of Education can do, as if that person could somehow, with a magic wand, change education. That is patently false. It would take action by this Congress to have that happen. The reality of it is that while it is an important position, she cannot act unilaterally. And the one commitment that I made sure that I had from her is that she had the same, she viewed the world of education through the same paradigm that I do, which is we don't want a top-down approach to education. We actually want school districts and local communities and counties and states to lead the charge. Because about $550 billion that supports public education doesn't come from the federal government. It comes from the states, the local school districts. That's where the decisions should be made. I'm a supporter of school choice. However, it would just be an option under the best case scenario where states would have more options at the cafeteria. I don't want to mandate. She's not going to be able to mandate school choice. That will be our decision. And I've decided I don't want to make it happen. I want to give the states and the local school districts the opportunity to make their own decisions, which does lead me, of course, to my support and her support of school choice. I would submit that most of us in this nation supports school choice. I know that is a controversial statement and one where you have to back it up with facts, but here's a fact. The fact is that we as a nation consistently support school choice. It's called a Pell Grant. A Pell Grant is a federal subsidy that oftentimes goes to private schools, colleges. Unfortunately, many kids who do not meet or exceed the standards in English, math, and science will never experience the Pell Grant because they don't go on to a 2-year or a 4-year education. They don't go to a technical school or to a college. They don't find themselves experiencing what we as a federal government provide, a clear and specific option to take your federal dollars to your private colleges. We all seem to support school choice. We just don't seem to support it for those kids trapped in failing school districts, underperforming schools. Those kids will never see the Pell Grant so often, too many of those kids will not see a Pell Grant, which is absolutely, positively, unequivocally school choice. Mr. President, I'll tell you that I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because I believe that men and women in this chamber are sincere and serious about the debate around public education. And I'll tell you that there are reasons to believe that in spite of the dismal performance that I've read, that there's reasons to be hopeful that the future for those kids in public education can get better, significantly better. And let me, as I wrap up my comments here, Mr. Chairman, reflect upon what's possible for kids who were underperforming to become high achieving. So often we label those kids as at-risk kids. I prefer to call them high potential kids. There are examples in this nation where those kids who are performing so poorly according to the third grade statistics around meeting or exceeding expectations, according to ESA, those kids later in life and in different programs in New York City specifically are doing incredibly well. Let me give you a couple of examples, and I will close with this good news and more to be continued later this morning. There is a group of schools called Success Academies, which are public charter schools that are performing at the highest level in the state of New York. And here's the good news. These kids are 87% African American and Hispanic. And I went through the numbers earlier, dismal numbers in meeting or exceeding standards in English. The numbers are very similar in math. They're very similar in science. But here's what's possible. In all the New York State schools, the top performing schools in the state, and looking at the performance, 94% success rates in math, 82% in English, 99% in science. And to break those numbers down, as I did earlier with the African American and Hispanic students, in math, here's how you reverse the achievement gap. 93% of African American Success Academy scholars outperform majority students in New York City. 80% of them, African Americans, and 80% of Hispanics are at 80%. You see, Mr. President, with the right focus, with the right emphasis, with options like a cafeteria, when parents have a choice, students have a chance, not just in education, but a better chance in life. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.